Hello and welcome back to the League of Record podcast. I am the commish that gives you the ick, Brian Ganzenmuller. I am here with another one of our valued League of Record members, the reigning bronze medalist after the Olympics here. That is Dan Fiegl. Fiegl, how you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I am great. We're going to talk about your team that I think surprised maybe a couple people by finishing third place last year. Probably surprised yourself by the
Hey,
looks of
man.
it.
A third place. I have a fourth place finish and a 10th place finish. And if you look at the overall all-time standings, I'm second worst behind you or in front of you. So it works out really well. I don't know how it's possible, but we're doing it.
I did not look at the all-time standings. That's kind of fascinating. We'll get to that. Let me
Yeah.
just start like I've as you know, if you've listened to the first couple of these, I've got a series of questions that I'll ask you about your specific team, and then we'll get into another team that I've hand selected for you to go through. We're going to start with your own team, of course. Like we were just kind of getting at, you had this big finish. You snuck into the playoffs at 6 seed. There was kind of, I recall, there were a bunch of teams fighting for that last spot at the end of last season. You finish a blistering 500 record to sneak in there and then run your way to third place. I mean, was your finish a total mirage, or were you feeling pretty good about that?
Um, well, when you get on that heater, you feel good, right? Like it was you get those last couple games and you're actually making progress. The team itself, I would attribute to more of a lack of patience on my side because I sat there and, I made moves that probably aren't dynasty friendly moves. But I needed to make moves to get, say Dak Prescott. I traded away Kyron Williams, who I thought at the time, and I still partially think at the time that he's not the guy, but I'm one of the few that think he's not one of the top running backs in the league. But I traded him away for a quarterback, which you don't necessarily ever do. But since the beginning of this league, I've started Aaron Rodgers, Danny Dimes,
Ugh.
Kirk Cousins. It's like I haven't had a quarterback. So I knew if I wanted to compete, I'd have to have at least consistent play. And then that's pretty much been my whole plan the last like 2 years was trying to get consistency. Because I'll tell you what, my team is not going to sit there and boom 8 weeks out of the year, and they're not going to bust 8 weeks out of the year. They're just going to sit at 90 points every single week.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, and in fairness, like, a couple points there, like the original Kyron Dak deal. I mean, you were picking up some draft capital on that deal. You were
Right.
trying to sell, quote unquote, sell high on Kyron if you and you were far from the only one who in the dynasty community that thought like, okay, this guy's a fifth round running back, let me cash in.
Right.
That was not like a crazy take. And then on top of that, you got a back half of the year from Dak last year. I think it was like QB3 or something
You
like that
finished
over the back
you
half.
finished QB3 overall.
So then he must have been higher than that on the back half. So I mean, they're in a way that did, turn out sort of how you
Right.
wanted
Well,
it.
and
It just
then
didn't quite in the way you envisioned it.
right. And then when I saw that I was at the cusp, I sat there and I'm like, okay, well, I have now two first round picks because I got a first back from Kyron in that deal, and then it was um trade with the Shats to get Najee Harris, Kelvin Ridley, and Evan Ingram. And again, like Evan Ingram finished top five tight end, I think. I think he was five or six, something like that. And that certainly helped. But again, did that help me? It helped me last year, yes.
Mm.
Um, and obviously like this year, but losing what ended up being a fourth overall pick in that trade could have gone either way. But going into it, I was not a fan like after I knew it was a fourth round pick and we made, or I don't know if I knew it was a fourth at that point, but
Well, that one was actually just let me because this is leading into another question,
okay.
for later, but just to make to uh correct the record, you were the 104 trade you made was separate in the off season that you flipped from 104 to 110
Right.
uh
Okay.
with Shat and moved
Right. Yeah,
down
that was a
out of.
different one. You're right. Okay.
Yeah, separate, which I know because it was I was going to ask you about trades as well, but you could continue your point. I'll ask that question separately, but go on.
But yeah, that was just more of like that move was I wasn't a big Bowers fan, and I had Ingram, I have Musgrave, I have Isaiah Likely. I didn't feel like I needed the tight end there, and all the other receivers that are kind of bunched up in that group, I felt like I would still be able to get one in the later rounds. And then it's funny because then I ended up grabbing Trey Benson instead.
Hmm. Right. And that was part of, what I was going to ask you about. Benson, kind of checks in as, you had in terms of like your youth in the running back room, not a whole lot of it. You kind of and I myself in a different dynasty league was thinking that Damian Pierce, it was like, oh man, nailed it this first year, fucking great, this is amazing. And then that fell off a cliff like real fast. That was and then you had Roshan as well as a potential, maybe this guy's got some
Well,
juice, and then they bring in DeAndre Swift. So it's like you kind of saw the youth that was left in your RB room kind of like evaporate. So I'd
right.
imagine that was what went into
Well, that's
Benson.
pretty much the way that my entire 3 year stretch here has gone. Was I had J.K. Dobbins.
Ooh, yeah.
I still have J.K. Dobbins. We still haven't seen J.K. Dobbins. I don't know if it's year one, year two. I traded for uh, Clyde Edwards-Helaire because,
Mm.
young running back with the Chiefs. I think he's going to work out. No, and I get rid of a guy. I got rid of Zeke, Pollard, James Conner because I thought I had these young guys, and then
Mm.
with the talk of Gainwell was going to get a little more reps in Philly, and then they bring in Rashad Penny and DeAndre Swift, and then just kill Gainwell. So it's like, okay, then they both leave. You're like, all right, cool. Maybe Gainwell's going to gain something here. No, bring in Saquon Barkley. So it's like all these young running backs that I'm trying to grab are always ending up in the wrong place. So that just becomes like now I'm not trying to say I'm throwing darts because I'm really big high on Benson.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, it's like my young running backs became a dart throw. And to supplement that, I ended up making moves to get a little more veteran guys that could maybe withstand some stuff. But as you see that they're declining as well. And now it's like, okay, we need some of our young guys to step up here.
Yeah, honestly, I kind of forgotten, and I'm glad that you went through the whole history there. I kind of forgotten your tortured history dating back, even before last year, talking about guys like Dobbins and CEH and all that. You really kind of have had a tough go of it with that running back room. So that certainly puts some context onto why Benson was a guy that you were targeting. Maybe not necessarily you go out and you make like sort of to your point about trading down to 110. You don't do that thinking like I'm gonna go get Benson there, but you
Right.
do it because you go back there and like Benson is sort of in a tier of like a few guys like in that little back of the first area, as opposed to like, well, I don't love Bowers at 104, so I'm taking what Xavier Worthy. Fuck the Chiefs. Like I don't want that guy on my
Right.
team, right?
Well, and that's the thing too with it was, okay, you're talking at 4, 5, 6. I could have went with like Caleb Williams, but I'm not going to invest that much into a quarterback right in the first like 4 picks. I need someone who could change the game. And then it's like, okay, well, at 4, like you said, Xavier Worthy, Keenan Coleman, Brian Thomas. Okay, but I could also make the argument that those guys are also going to be there at 10.
Hmm.
So it was like I could have went with one of them. I could have waited, and so that was the thing. It was like, okay, I'm gonna wait and see what receivers are there, see if Benson, because Benson was always a guy I was targeting, but um if one of the receivers were there, I would maybe have gone that way, but I like my receiver room a little bit more than my running back room.
That actually sort of led into another question that I ask every team, and it sounds like you kind of answered it there. And I ask what you
The answer
feel
is
the
none. The answer is zero. I have zero strengths.
well, okay, if you had to pick a
No,
position group,
I'm
it sounds like you would pick the receiver group,
right.
yeah?
Well, obviously, how can you when you have a guy like Debo, and I'm probably a little more high on McLaurin than some people are. The guy's produced over 1,000 yards receiving in every year, I think, except for his rookie year. So it's been like 4 straight years, and he's played with Tyler Heineke, Carson Wentz, um,
Sam
Sam
Howell,
Howell. I think Dwayne Haskins was in there at one
ooh,
point. And it's just like now he's getting a huge major upgrade at quarterback. Obviously Jaden Daniels has to prove some stuff, but I would argue that Jaden Daniels is a much better prospect and quarterback than everyone we just named.
absolutely. And then there
Because
was
when you
even
when
sort of
you look at,
timely. Go ahead, sir.
I was just gonna say, when you look at like guys like Drake London who are getting a little bit more love because Kirk Cousins is down there now. Garrett Wilson, obviously he gets a little more because now Aaron Rodgers is back. And it's like, okay, well, McLaurin has the same talent as them, but no one's really talking about him getting an upgrade from Howell to Jaden Daniels.
Mhm. And on top of that, just to like, it's just funny that we're talking about I almost called them the Redskins, the Commanders today. Um, there was a news report out today, or a clip from the press conference for the Washington coach who said something about, well, it was asked about his wide receiver too, and he was like, yeah, we're still kind of trying to find that guy. It's like, wait, you don't have a wide receiver too, then your tight end room is a fresh rookie and the corpse of Zach Ertz. You might have a pretty concentrated target tree here in terms
Right.
of, and that's a Cliff Kingsbury offense that is going to run quite a lot of plays. They're going to run pace.
Yep.
They're going to have
That
fast pace.
fast
So
paced, and they have two running backs that can catch the ball out of the backfield in Eckler and Robinson.
mm,
But that's the thing is like, what are those? Who's going to get those targets? And I think McLaurin is undervalued in a lot of redrafts and stuff like that. But I think he's a very underrated player.
I'm taking notes for the redraft that you and I have coming up
Yeah, in like 2 days, 3 days.
on was that Sunday? Actually, you know what? Let me ask a question about that because this and this is not related to either of our teams here. This league of record has really been successful, I think, by all measures in terms of participation in the league, how much people enjoy the league on a regular basis. And we certainly hope that it goes on. I would take it go into infinity until we're all
Right.
friggin' old and gray. You and I are in our Tops Friendly Markets League. It is the oldest league that I am in, and probably the oldest league that you were in since what, 2006, 7, eight,
I think it
something
was
like that.
2008 was our first year of it. I think this will be like technically our 16th year going strong at it. And
Man.
I think the more incredible part of that is what I see this league becoming, where we have 9 of the original. It was a 10-man league when we first started, and we have 9 of the original 10 still in our 12-man league now. And I feel like that's how this league is too, where there's just so much participation, everybody's communicating, everyone kind of has a say in things. So it's like that consistency and just like having fun with everybody is where fantasy football should be. It should be fun.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of got lucky here, and we even have such a league that some losers might even be listening to a podcast with a couple of schlubs sitting at 9:30 on a Thursday night. Um, let's bring it back
With
to
hopefully they're not watching the Patriots and Eagles here. So
ugh, no, I have no interest in watching
no,
uh
I
any of that gross Patriots. The Patriots are. I hope they win 3 games this year. Um,
I think we
they,
all do.
I mean, they traded
Go
Judah. They might
Bills.
win 3 games. Yeah. All right. So speaking about teams with weaknesses, um, I want to talk about now. We've hit a couple of areas of your team. We've talked about the running backs. Now with and we touched on your Dak ownership and your quarterback room and something that you were probably hoping that you'd be able to have a young guy coming up in JJ McCarthy who suddenly is not coming up anymore. So what do you think? I mean, is the quarterback with the lack of depth there? I mean, the only quarterback on your roster, and I can't even believe he's rostered, is
Well,
fucking Hendon Hooker.
he's going to be dropped, okay? He was on the taxi squad, he was on IR, he's going to be dropped. It's fine.
He's on your team right now. I'm looking right
Well,
at it,
yeah,
but
you got to have a hooker on your team.
do you view the QB room as like kind of I know Dak, of course, you only need to start one quarterback. It's not a super flex league, but like, do you
Right.
think that quarterback is kind of where you're the most vulnerable, or is it more talking about the age of the running back room that we were talking about before, or something else?
I mean, in in a one quarterback league, I'm usually never over over worried about the quarterback situation. Like there's always guys out there in free agency. That being said, those guys are some of the ones that I already had and owned and dropped. Um, but yeah, like when you have one quarterback leagues, I never evaluate as if you have a top quarterback, you why? You're not going to ever bench him versus a defense unless it's a bye week.
Mhm.
And at that point, okay, pick up one of the guys that are out there. I thought at that point, maybe McCarthy would be playing already. And when you get set up with, you know, he's got arguably one of the best receivers in the game. Jordan Addison's a good young rook, or well, he was a good young rookie. And you got Aaron Jones, you got Hawkinson. I felt like McCarthy is in a spot where he could be successful. Obviously, that will have to wait and see. But so yeah, that was a little bit of a hurting in the quarterback room, but at the same time, I don't think I had any intention really to play him unless it was Dak's bye week or Dak got hurt. And if Dak gets
Mm.
hurt,
You're screwed anyway, probably. Yeah.
but you could say the same thing for anyone. Josh Allen gets hurt, I don't know
Mhm.
who's rostering Josh Allen right now or who his backup is, but like most people don't have the same capability in their backup quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, if only there was somebody in this league who could roster maybe say both Anthony Richardson and Jordan Love, that would be a really like interesting dynamic duo, but I digress.
Well, you could
Uh,
just fall ass backwards into it after you owned Trey Lance and I forget who your other quarterback was, Joe Flacco, maybe.
I had Jared Goff for a little while. But yeah, I hear it on the one quarterback, issue. Like it's sort of hard. Like even if the quarterback room in theory could be like your objective like weakness, it doesn't necessarily mean you're like quote unquote worried about it because
Right,
again, if like Dak goes down, you even with McCarthy as a rookie quarterback, you probably weren't going to be in a great place anyway. You'd probably be looking on the waiver wire
right.
for your Sam Darnolds and your Garner Minshews to try to
Right. And
play
it's
matchups.
at that point, if Dak goes down, it just becomes, well, okay, I kind of know where this season's going to kind of end up.
Mhm.
Typical to a regular NFL team, if Jalen Hurts goes down, okay, well,
Yeah.
what is Kenny Pickett going to step up and bring the Eagles to a Super Bowl? No, nobody believes
No.
that, you know. But I think the bigger thing is, you know, getting the consistent play out of Dak, health issues on all that aside, getting consistent play out of Dak, getting consistent play out of Evan Engram slash Luke Musgrave, you know, or Isaiah Likely. Those two one player positions, I'm not overly worried about. Um, for me, it's going to be our running back room. Um,
Mm.
you got Aaron Jones and Najee Harris leading the pack, and then you have a bunch of wild cards. I do have Jerome Ford, which I'm very happy with. He is a guy that we haven't really talked about.
Mm,
Um, but you've seen it with running backs with coming off knee injuries, and this is Nick Chubb's second knee injury. He's not going to come back week 1 and be Nick Chubb of old. He might not come back week 17 and be Nick Chubb of old.
mm.
So having Jerome Ford in there is one of those younger guys that he might be able to step up and contribute a lot to the team that might not necessarily get the help that it needs.
That's a waiver wire ad, right? If I recall correctly.
Oh yeah, and it is. And it was a good one.
You
Back.
love when you can find
But that was in like I want to say is in the off season or like at the very end of the season
mm,
of his rookie year. So like 2 years ago. And they had Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt at the time. But
mm,
like Hunt was going on a free agency. So it's like,
yeah.
okay, I took a chance on him.
Yeah.
Sort of similar to when I traded for Kyron Williams because they had Cam Akers there.
Mm.
And it was before that. And, but we don't need to get into Kyron Williams and the downfalls of how bad my running back room is without Kyron Williams.
I mean, I'm sure Cam Akers is available. It's
Yeah.
yeah, if you really
But
want to
that's
get go down that road.
but like I had started originally as like a lot of it was kind of impatience by my part because again, like, okay, I got Kyron for almost nothing. And it's like, okay, so trade him away while he was at his peak. Well, okay, I could be sitting here with Kyron Williams leading my backfield. I think year 1 traded away Michael Pittman. Okay, he could have been sitting in my wide receiver 2 or 3 and dropping McLaurin down. And it's
Hmm.
the do's and don'ts of how to do dynasty football.
It's tricky. I mean, it's. I wonder if that. 'Cause I happened to notice I was pulling up, your trade history. Uh, you're kind of, I think, one of the few teams this in this league that has not made a trade this year involving a player. Like in this offseason, all your trade, you've had 2 trades, both been picks trades.
Right.
Does that have anything to do with it? Like, you kind of you made a purchase last year with like the Ridley Ingram Najee deal, which we talked about, which, in my opinion, you actually regardless of the ages of those players, you got decent value on that
Right.
deal because Shats were looking to burn it down,
Yep.
and you kind of swooped in at the end of that. So I think that was like a solid bit of work. But you are working with like a full stock of draft capital right now. Like you have a clean cap sheet, so to speak,
Well, and
your dynasty team.
that's one of the interesting things too, is like the last 2 years, I think I was in like the top 3 of draft capital. This year, obviously, I had like 4 4th-round picks, which who cares at that point?
I ain't never heard of a couple of the guys that you drafted, man. And I'm a nerd. I'm a nerd at this stuff. I ain't never heard who that fucking guy and Anais Smith or whatever the fuck that
Oh,
guy. I have
Anaya
no
Smith,
idea who that guy is.
Cornelius Johnson, man.
You made those guys. Those are Key and Peele players.
Either way, again, those are going to be, I'm over the limit, so those are roster fatalities, but
Yeah.
and that's where it becomes lost picks, right? But when you have those earlier round picks, then you can move those to get some higher end players, which, like I said, part of it is that's what I was doing with getting, the veteran core that I have. Um, because I think Debo, I would say Debo, McLaurin, and probably Dobbins are the only 3 on my team from like the original startup.
That's kind of crazy, actually. Wow. Yeah,
Where
that's
most
a lot of turnover.
right. And it's like, okay, so to have the team that I have right now and to finish 3rd last year, I was very happy with, but I'm not comfortable that it's going to be a repeat by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah, so I mean, what do you need to see in order to? I mean, obviously, everybody can talk about like, oh, all my players just like play good and I do good. But I mean, how do you see the path to like, getting back into the playoffs and seeing if you can make some noise again? Like, what has to happen? Does it involve making another trade for a dependable guy, a guy who can give you consistent scoring, in years? Is that
Well,
what you're kind of waiting for, or what?
kind of for almost like with what you went through is I need to have some of my younger guys step up. If J.K. Dobbins can step into, because he's still only like 24, 25 years old. He's still young. He's been in the league 3 years, but you only played like 4 games.
Yeah.
Um, but like I need a guy like Dobbins or Benson to step up in the running back game. Um, Receiver wise, it's filling that third receiver spot in a, and flex, whatever. But you got to have someone with Ridley, whether it's Ridley or Quentin Johnston or,
Ugh. Oh,
well,
we
yeah,
shouldn't even talk. We shouldn't even. Yeah, you just skip to the next name.
you got,
Skip right over him.
you forced him back on my team. I tried to drop him,
Yeah,
like,
really, you were just doing the right thing, the correct
right.
thing all the way back then.
I was just, trying to foreshadow what was actually going to happen to him. But yeah, it's getting one of those younger players to step up and really come into either the wide receiver 3 flex spot and play at a consistent level, where we can, because that's the biggest thing is, it's I'm getting 8 points here, 8 points there. Well, let's say anywhere from 8 to 12 points every week from every player on my roster. And it's like, okay, that's great. I'm getting that consistency, but when you play some of the big dogs, you're battling uphill from the get-go.
Trying to get upside. No, I definitely, yeah, you can have consistency, but like if you don't have that guy that can spike for, oh, he
Right.
dropped 23 points this week,
But
and
that was always kind of my goal, even at the startup, was getting some of the veteran players and then getting young guys to step up. And it just seems like when the young guys step up, I end up like trading them away, or my young guys just don't step up. And
mm,
it's been a swing and a miss then on that. And then it's like, okay, like Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if he was the guy and Isaiah Pacheco is nowhere to be found, then I'd be still okay, but I took a swing and I missed and set me back, but we're here,
mm.
finishing third. Shame on everybody else in the league.
And man, even if you look at every team of this league from top to bottom, there's a trade that every one of us wants back. There's a draft
Sure.
pick that every one of us wants back. It's just that's what makes Dynasty what I think it's become just by far like
Well, and
my
that's what,
favorite
like,
type of fantasy to play.
especially last year, was making that move with the Shats at the end of the year to help propel my team to a third
Yeah.
place
I mean,
finish.
that's three starters right there. Like that's like
Right.
not that's nothing to sneeze at. That's three plug and play dudes. Maybe not like it's the top, a top 10 dynasty asset, but those are three dudes that I mean, Matt, just let's just think about like if we were looking at your team today and you didn't have those three guys,
Right.
it would be a kind of a wasteland. You'd be like kind of in this
We
like
probably
broken
would have.
middle.
Right. Well, we probably would have ended up trying to, battle for the last place spot last year,
Yeah.
but it was when you get to a certain point, and then I made those deals, and it's like, okay, well, let's go see what we can do. And it's like I end up feeling like I don't know, San Diego Chargers, where all of a sudden you go on
Mm.
this little tear, but then you hit the play, like, well, last year it wasn't that I hit the playoffs and won a couple games, like inched out a couple games, but it's one of those things where it's like I sent the GIF in the chat the one time with the two dragons, and then there's me going, it's like that's really how it felt. Was like I can't compete with these guys, but somehow I'm here.
Well, and
And then
it's
it's
so
funny because
it's
the like third place game, I ended up like putting up like the most points I've had all season long in like 135 points. And I'm like, if I had just been able to make the championship, I
yeah,
don't know.
135.2 points. You beat Schmitty by 40 points. Uh, Backed by Najee Harris scoring 27 points. There's your, your explosive
Right.
effort that we were talking about. And Jerome Ford, your boy we were talking about earlier, led you in scoring, or actually was right there with Najee with 26 points. Like that's an explosion right there
Right.
at a
Like,
good
so
time.
obviously you're not going to get 26 every time, but those are the ones where it's like, I need those guys to be more of that, not just those guys, Aaron Jones too, but like you need your top running backs to be top running backs. And I just don't have the confidence in, a 29-year-old Aaron Jones going to a new team. Well, he does have the opportunity there because, I mean, there's Ty Chandler, but then what happens? You got Sam Darnold throwing the ball. and who's worried about Sam Darnold throwing the ball?
Everybody
Prob-
that owns a Vikings player in
right.
in
I was
in
gonna
fantasy.
say
Yeah.
probably no one more than Justin Jefferson.
Heard that. As a Jefferson owner, as you well know, I have definitely heard that.
Right.
No,
So
it's
it's like it's I think this year is probably going to be a big step back for me. Um, but there's some pieces there to be able to compete still. But like
yeah.
it's definitely needs to have some of the young guys start stepping up.
Isn't it so interesting how I was going to make the comment about what you were kind of getting at about your, the path you were going to take last year, and it sounds like you're in like the kind of the same spot this year because every year in Dynasty there's like the couple rebuilders, right? I've spent plenty of time there, I know it well,
Right.
and then basically everybody else fancies himself a contender, right? But you sort of taking a very like kind of realistic view of like where you're at the end of last season, and it sounds like even now, if things go a certain way, you're kind of on this knife's edge where you're like, I could make a run and finish third place. I could blow it up. There are not a lot of teams that are kind of like right at the crossroads on that kind of consistent basis because you showed you have a team that can make a little run in the playoffs. You have a team that if everybody's connecting on all cylinders, you can make some noise. But then it's like you also, okay, one or two things go wrong, and I'm the fire sale team this year.
Yep.
Like that's like kind of nut. I don't think there's a lot of teams that are like right on that knife's edge. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and that's the thing is it's like it all goes back to the whole patience. You had to endure 2 years of pure shit, but now you have a team but again, you hit on most of your picks. Like with what the Shats did this year, it's still going to be very hard for them to get to a competitive level because you got to hit on multiple of those picks. And, how many times have we seen rookies, rookie quarterbacks, rookie receivers just not do anything?
Mhm. Yeah, it's
And,
it's all lottery tickets, man. Like at the end of the day, like, and it's an interesting strategy. I talked about it with Serms on our first podcast about pushing all that draft capital into this year and wanting to have
right.
high picks this year, part of which they got from you for their Bowers pick. But yeah, I mean, you just it's like anything else. It's like hard to hit on the guys. Like it's hard to get enough.
Well,
You can have all the
and then
draft capital in the world, but you could pick all shit dudes.
and what's part of that is you have to endure shit because you have to see if they're going to produce or not. And that's where you have the fire sale and you get rid of Najee and you get rid of Kelvin and you get rid of Ingram. But then I'm sitting on the other side and it's like, okay, well, I've had, I think last year I had 7 picks, again, talking fourth round picks too, which isn't really anything. But the year before, again, I had like 6 picks. And it's like, okay, so I'm still getting lottery tickets out of some of these guys. And
Mm.
that's where I'm at is like I have this older established core, but I need the rookies to start producing and making a way in there.
Yeah. No, I love this conversation. I want to make sure we get onto our next team though to make sure that
Yeah,
we
yeah, yeah.
fit everything in because speaking of an older team, the team you're going to be reviewing now is Win Now Rob, another guy who has relied pretty heavily on old dusted veterans to try to make a push. And interestingly, sat on that third place mantle, I think 2 years in a row before you jumped into the third
Yeah.
place situation. So if you want, I can share his team on the screen, or if you're pulling it up, you can look on your phone or whatever. But
Yeah, I'm pulling it up right now. So
yeah, no, it's because he's kind of I view your teams as a little bit similar. Like you have kind of a similar age profile. You have, you've taken your young shots, as you said, but in terms of the
the
producing
core.
dudes, like
Yep.
the guys who you're putting in your starting lineup, they're definitely on the older side. So like, how do you view, the strategy Rob took from that right from that startup? You kind of echoed it in your own team. Like you wanted to get some like, I'm going to take these dependable veterans. I know that they're going to produce, and Rob kind of started out that same way. So like, how do you view sort of his trajectory from where he started and just going heavy, I'm getting all the old guys, to now where he's kind of maybe gearing up for maybe one last hurrah?
Right. Well, it's funny because when obviously I've watched the last 2 podcasts and yeah, you talk about a team that's similar and I'm like, it's gonna be Rob because him and I have the same construct right now. Like he has a couple of younger players that have started producing for him, like Pacheco. Um, but he's still rocking Derrick Henry and Mike Evans, Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, all guys who, when things are firing, they're good. There's no denying that. That could be easy the best um, receiver core in the league with Devontae, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp. Like if all three of them are playing like they did 3 years ago,
Mm.
we're talking like three in the top 8 receivers. The problem, same thing with me, is if you aren't getting that consistent basis and you're getting those guys to produce, the depth behind it's he did draft
Mm.
AD Mitchell there, but like the depth behind it, you're gonna need guys to step up. And that's where it really does
Mm.
become a little bit more of a struggle.
Mm.
Um, if they don't step up, then you end up sitting on that fine line, as you said, of
Mm.
are we going to just fire sale this or are we going to try to compete? But you
Right.
know
No, yeah, it's definitely a very similar profile. Seems, I mean, he to be able to hit, and he's got, steady, just being able to have Hurts just like inserted into your lineup every week, like, and just know that that's going to be one of the three best quarterbacks in fantasy basically every
right.
single week with that push of the tush. It's a
One
pretty good
what
situation.
works very well for that having Jalen Hurts is you're getting rushing appeal. You're getting rushing touchdowns, where that's going to help if your running backs are not producing, to that level. That's where having, for me, having Dak, I'm not getting as many rushing yards. I'm not getting the rushing touchdowns. So my running backs need to play like running backs.
Mm.
If Derrick Henry has an off day, but Jalen Hurts runs for 70 yards and 2 touchdowns, it's okay.
Yeah, it's sort of seems. Would you say that relative to your team as you kind of look at this starting lineup that this lineup as it stands might have like a higher ceiling but like maybe a little bit of a lower floor like because if you have I mean Devontae Adams had a couple games last year getting the ball thrown to him from God knows who where he had this stretch of the year he's getting 6.5 3.9 9.2 1.6 5.4 that was a gross stretch of time you have the worry about injuries for some of the older guys. So like maybe like those guys have higher highs than yours, but maybe lower floors as well. You think as a
No,
whole, just like
I
talking about like as a unit, starting
right.
unit.
As the whole unit, I think I would argue that his floor is higher than mine. Um, just because like his running back, I mean, Derrick Henry, his off games are gonna be
Hmm.
what still probably 10 points minimum. Whereas like for me, Aaron Jones, his and Najee Harris, I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibilities that their floor is 4 points and the bench.
Hmm.
Especially Najee, like to Jalen Warren's coming on. Aaron Jones doesn't have as much competition there. I mean, Ty Chandler is there, but I don't think he is going to overstep that much.
Careful what you say about my boy Ty Chandler.
I
You know,
know,
you
I
know he's
know,
on my roster.
I know. I'm just saying, but yeah, I think I would argue that Rob has a little bit higher of a floor than what I have. But he's in the same boat where he needs that flex spot, and he's got the rookie tight end from Washington there, but he needs those guys to hit, to if he wants to go back into the playoffs and make the run.
Mhm. Yeah, that sort of let you kind of right there answer my next question is like kind of like what you see as the weakness of this team and again the similarities you kind of talked about it with your squad. It's like if you have a tough day like at the flex like you got
Right.
problems. Like if you need somebody else, you can't take like a 3 point performance in that spot when if you're going up against one of the heavy hitters in this league, you
Right.
kind of need things to go correctly on that spot. And if it's AD Mitchell that ends up being in that spot, then it's
Well,
Richard. It's it's
that's
it's
the
like it's a
tough
gamble. It's a
right.
gamble.
That's the tough part with, looking at the depth of his team. It's like where where do you plan on going here? If you do have an injury, if you know AD Mitchell isn't the guy, it's hard to find another guy there that's going to sit in that spot that can help you produce. But you know, the nice part is he's got the three receivers there where, like I said, mine I have to sit there with wide receiver three being
Mm.
Calvin Ridley. If is he gonna produce? Is he not? He did well for me last year with Jacksonville, but now he's going with Will Levis up there in
The
Kansas
mayonnaise
City.
man himself.
Right. So, he could come out and catch, 90 balls and 1,000 yards and be perfectly fine. And if that's the case, then yeah, I'm in the same boat with Rob and we just need that flex spot to hit. And, that's where, like I said, his floor I think is a little bit higher than mine because of that
Mm.
security of his wide receiver three. I mean, I can always
That
throw Gabe Davis into mine, so
let's not even talk about Gabe Davis.
that I didn't want to bring it up, but I figured I would throw that one dig in for myself there.
I skipped right over it in the side. I deliberately did not put him in there. So that's all you bringing that, just stabbing yourself in the chest there. Um, so given that you view this team, I mean, and the starting lineup, outside of the maybe flex tight end where there may be some weakness, like that core like six dudes that Hurts, Derrick Henry, Pacheco, Devontae Adams, Evans, Cup, like you regard those guys like very, very highly. So does that make this team like somebody you were like concerned to face? Like you saw this team in the playoffs, like firing on all cylinders. You'd be like, oh shit, like you're
I mean,
worried about this
Ryan,
team.
look, we've talked about it. I'm concerned about every team in this league. I'm not every single week. I'm not going to be comfortable going into a matchup and think I have an edge anywhere. Um, but yeah, that's if I do think that if Rob's team is producing the way that we know, like the big thing is that's the name. We know the names. We know every single one of those names. But is Derrick Henry going to run like Derrick Henry? We don't know. Is Devontae Adams going to relive his Green Bay days and be, a top five receiver? Is Cooper Kupp going to come back healthy and become the guy, or is Puka stealing all the attention now? So
Mm.
it's one of those things where like he's in that same boat where there is a really, really fine line of things that could go wrong or things that could really, really go right. And if all those guys are hitting on the right cylinder, I mean, yeah, you got to be a little bit afraid of playing this team because of all those guys that we just named. They are and have been all top players at their position.
Mhm. Now, what about obviously we talk about age of both your team and his team. What about like looking past 2024? He's got it's sort of similar to you. I mean, you both, sort of, you have all your picks essentially. After both of you did quite a lot of movement of draft picks over the course of the past, 2, 3 years. Now you both essentially have that clean picks sheet there. But he's on sort of, his big guys at least on kind of a similar age trajectory to you. So like, where do you see his prospects like getting out of 2024 going into the next couple of years after that?
Right. Like that's going to be this along the same in me is where you have these young guys that you can't trust to put into your lineup right now. You need them to show you something. He does have Pacheco, who's a little bit younger.
Yeah.
He's got, maybe
Hurts will be around for a while, so like Hurt,
right. So
he's
like
not
those
going anywhere.
those two are good, but like after that, it's like, okay, who replaces Derrick Henry? Who replaces Devontae Adams and Mike Evans? If Mitchell becomes a guy, then yes, but you got three older veteran receivers that you need to replace. And when you look at the team, it's an AD Mitchell. If he's not the guy, you're talking Xavier Gibson, Jacoby Myers, KJ Osborne, Jalen
Mhm.
Tolbert, Trey Palmer. Like there's really nobody there that you're looking at and waiting for them to break out. So that's where, you if things start going wrong, you might see Rob on the fire sale this year. But same thing with me. If things start going wrong, you're going to see me on the
Hmm.
fire sale this year. Things go right, you're fine. But then that makes it a little more tough to get those replacement pieces in place because, the further you go, the further back in the draft you are. And
Hmm.
now all of a sudden you're going to be having to make moves, make trades, all that kind of stuff.
Does it feel like this will be my last question about the league? Does it feel like because we know there are very, two very clear rebuilding teams and Shat and Luke. Uh, does it feel like there are more people that feel like their team is good than there's ever been in this league before? Like we have 10 people who legitimately believe like I got a shot at maybe not first place, but I got a shot at
Well,
like the
yeah,
silver medal.
whenever everyone's going to be looking up to Justin there in his roster and his construction there, but that's one of those things where you try to emulate that as best as you can. But well, that's the crazy part is, you see you and Serms as two of the guys that, I mean, you started out on the lower end and you've hit on picks and you've made moves and you've made trades that you guys can now get into the playoffs and make the push. Um, and do so mostly with a young roster. And that's what you need to do in a dynasty because now you got that longevity. But there's always going to be those veteran players who are producing. So it's going to be, yeah, where you look at it season to season. Yes, I think my team can compete this year. I don't think my team is going to turn many heads this year, but it's more of I'm at the point where I need to try to produce for this year, but also start working on getting my pieces for the next year and following that.
It's a hard balance to strike. We all know it.
But
Um,
to answer the question going back is yes, I do think there's 10 teams that literally sit here and think that week after week they are going to win and move into, further into the playoffs and compete. And that makes it for a fun, great year ahead of us. But you know that it's fantasy football and there's injuries and you're going to have some guys who are get very disappointed and I could be one of them. You could be one of them. If it's a matter of who can pick the right pieces at the right time.
well, that's an excellent summation. I'm going to end us there. The last little thing I have, I've been doing this with all of the dads that I bring onto the podcast. We have a couple of pretty new fathers in the group, myself and then Serms with a fresh new little
Yeah.
baby at home. You've got two sprightly boys yourself. Got any advice for the Serms on fatherhood?
Uh I would say it's just the cliche that everybody says is enjoy it because it does go fast and you don't think that it does. But last year my oldest went to kindergarten. Today we were out on the front and I'm teaching him how to ride his bike and it's like pretty soon he's gonna be riding his bike around the block without me and doesn't, and it's like, geez, this is like is this what it, and you feel good about it, but it's like all of a sudden it's like, where the heck did the time go? So it is that dumb cliche of time goes fast and you do got to cherish it. I know that's hard because like I'm still in that boat where, some days are a lot tougher than others with them, but they're kids, they're resilient, and so are you. So, it'll be the most loving and most hating thing you've ever done in your life.
Man, making me sad thinking about riding bikes around without me. Not even 4 months in. I'm already getting sad about thinking about that. But it's a good piece of advice and a good note to end on. Thank you for hanging out with me late into the night
Yeah,
tonight. Went a little longer than our usual podcast, but I think we got there was a lot of insight on where
I
you're
talk too
at.
much sometimes.
No, I've only known you for what, 20 years. I've never known you to talk too much ever, not a single time. Um,
Especially when I'm drinking.
yeah. I want to thank everybody for sticking with, for those of you that made it to the end. Thanks for making it to the end and sticking with us. We will see you on the next episode, and thanks to Fiegl for your time.
Catch you later.